In the hushed, velvet-draped dining room of Manhattan's most exclusive restaurant, a deal worth $10 billion was about to be destroyed by a single, misunderstood word. The air, usually thick with the scent of truffle oil and quiet success, was now crackling with the fury of one of the world's richest men. Henry Sterling, a titan of technology, was watching his empire teeter on the brink of collapse. His Japanese partners were silent, their faces impassive masks of offense. Nobody spoke their language. Nobody could fix it. The billionaire was fuming, his voice a low growl of impending doom, and then from the shadows the waitress replied. The Gilded Compass wasn't just a restaurant. It was a statement. Perched 70 floors above Columbus Circle, its panoramic windows framed Central Park like a living masterpiece. The clientele was a curated collection of old money, new tech, and quiet power. The staff moved with the silent, rehearsed grace of ballet dancers, their purpose to be invisible yet omniscient. Among them, Khloe Reed was an anomaly. To the casual observer, she was just another part of the impeccable service. Slender with quiet grey eyes and brown hair, pulled back in a severe regulation bun, she projected an aura of unassuming efficiency. She was 24, but her weary, watchful expression made her seem older. Most of her colleagues were aspiring actors or artists waiting tables to fund their dreams. Khloe was just waiting. She never spoke of a past, and her plans for the future were a conversational black hole. She simply did her job with a precision that bordered on obsessive. Her movements economical, her mind seemingly a universe away. Her colleagues whispered. They speculated she was in witness protection, or perhaps the disowned heiress of some forgotten dynasty. The truth was far more mundane, and in its own way, more painful. Khloe was hiding in plain sight, using the anonymity of a service uniform as a shield against a life she had sprinted away from 3 years ago. A life of suffocating expectations of gilded cages in a different part of the world. Here as a waitress, she was nobody. And nobody was exactly who she needed to be. Tonight, the tension in the Gilded Compass was unusually sharp. Table 12. The Prime Minister of Tables, with its unparalleled view of the park, was occupied by Henry Sterling. Sterling wasn't just wealthy. He was a force of nature. The founder and CEO of Aura Tech, he had clawed his way to the top of the tech world with a combination of genius ruthlessness and a volcanic temper. He was a man who didn't request, he demanded. He didn't ask, he commanded. The world bent to his will. Tonight, however, his will was being tested. Across the table from him sat 3 men from Yamato Corporation, the Japanese electronics giant. The leader was Mr. Sorjanard, Tanaka Kenji, an elderly, impeccably dressed man whose quiet demeanor and soft-spoken words held more weight than Sterling's loudest bellow. This wasn't just a dinner. It was the final, delicate step in a negotiation that would define Aura Tech's future. A $10 billion merger that would solidify Sterling's legacy or shatter it. Khloe was assigned to the section, but not the table itself. The manager, a perpetually stressed but decent man named Robert Mayfield, had assigned his most senior waiter, a Frenchman named Luke, to the task. Khloe's job was to be a ghost, ensuring water glasses were filled from a distance, that Luke had everything he needed, and to remain utterly invisible. From her vantage point by the service station, she watched the scene unfold like a slow-motion car crash. She saw Sterling's forced, toothy smile, the way his fingers drummed a frantic, impatient rhythm on the tablecloth. She saw his 2 VPs, a man and a woman in their 30s, looking pale and terrified. and she saw the Japanese delegation. They were a portrait of serene control, their politeness a shield. Sterling's brash American charm couldn't seem to penetrate. They had a translator, a young, eager man from Sterling's own company, but something was already wrong. Khloe could feel it in the air, a subtle dissonance in the rhythm of the conversation. The pauses were too long. The bows were a fraction too stiff. Mr. Tanaka spoke, his voice a low, melodic murmur. The translator listened, nodding vigorously, then turned to Sterling. "Mr. Tanaka expresses his admiration for the view, Mr. Sterling. He says it is a testament to your company's high aspirations." Sterling beamed, clapping his hands together. "Excellent. Tell him the only thing better than the view is the future our companies will build together." The translator relayed the message. Mr. Tanaka smiled faintly, a brief, polite flicker of the lips that didn't reach his eyes. Khloe, who had spent 18 years of her life immersed in the intricate dance of Japanese culture, recognized that smile. It was not a smile of agreement. It was a smile of polite endurance. She refilled a water glass at an adjacent table. Her ears tuned to the conversation at table 12. She couldn't hear the Japanese, only the English translations, but she could read the room. And the room was telling her that Henry Sterling, a man who could bend markets to his will, was failing. He was trying to conquer when he should have been trying to connect. He was loud when the moment called for quiet. He was treating this delicate, honor-bound negotiation like a hostile takeover, and the ice beneath his feet was growing thinner by the second. Khloe felt a familiar, unwelcome knot tighten in her stomach. It was the feeling of watching a powerful man make a fool of himself, a feeling she had spent the last 3 years trying to forget. She turned her back, focusing on polishing a wine glass until it gleamed, hoping to retreat back into the comfortable anonymity of her role. But she knew with a certainty that chilled her to the bone that the night was far from over. The first visible crack appeared with the appetizers. Luke, the veteran waiter, presented the amuse-bouche with a flourish. "Tonight, from Chef Antoine, we have a sea urchin panna cotta with a dashi foam and Kaluga caviar," he announced, his French accent lending an extra layer of gravitas to the dish. Sterling nodded enthusiastically. "The best in the city, only the best for my esteemed guests." Mr. Tanaka looked at the small, elegant dish. He said something to his translator in a quiet, inquisitive tone. The young translator's brow furrowed. He listened, asked for clarification, then turned to Sterling, his confidence visibly faltering. "Mr. Sterling, Mr. Tanaka is asking about the provenance of the uni." Sterling waved a dismissive hand. "Provenance? It's from the chef, the best chef. Tell him it's from the ocean, where else?" He chuckled. The VPs forced a laugh. The translator, looking miserable, attempted to relay this non-answer. Khloe watched Mr. Tanaka's face. His expression didn't change, but his posture stiffened almost imperceptibly. To Sterling, it was a simple question about food. To Mr. Tanaka, it was a question about respect for ingredients, about detail, about sincerity. A top-tier Japanese chef would know the exact prefecture, perhaps even the specific diver who procured the sea urchin. Sterling's glib response was not just unhelpful. It was an insult to the philosophy of the question itself. Khloe could almost hear the unspoken subtext. If you do not care where the smallest ingredient on your table comes from, how can I trust you with the intricate details of a multi-billion-dollar technology merger? The meal continued, a parade of exquisite dishes, each one a potential minefield. Robert, the manager, hovered nearby. His face, a mask of professional calm that barely concealed his rising panic. He caught Khloe's eye and gave a slight, almost imperceptible shake of his head, a silent acknowledgement that things were going poorly. The conversation had stalled. Sterling, sensing the growing chasm, began to overcompensate. He talked louder, gestured more broadly, and started telling a long, rambling story about a yachting trip in the Caribbean. It was meant to be a display of wealth and power, a way to impress them with his lifestyle. But to the reserved Japanese executives, it came across as boorish and self-aggrandizing. They listened with unwavering politeness, their silence a deepening abyss into which Sterling's monologue echoed and died. Then came the main course, a beautifully seared cut of A5 Wagyu beef. "Now this," Sterling boomed, "is something you'll appreciate, the finest Japanese beef right here in New York." Mr. Tanaka examined the perfectly marbled steak. He spoke to his translator again, a longer sentence this time, his tone still level but with a new, sharper edge. The translator swallowed hard. "Mr. Sterling," the young man began, his voice trembling slightly. "Mr. Tanaka asks. He understands this is from the Kagoshima prefecture. He is asking if you can confirm it is not from a farm in the vicinity of the Sakurajima volcano." Sterling stared, utterly baffled. "The what?" "The volcano. What in God's name does a volcano have to do with the steak?" The translator, now sweating under the pressure, tried to explain. "Sir, I believe it's a concern about the soil, the volcanic ash. For him, it is a matter of purity of the flavor profile. It is a very specific preference." "Specific? It's insane." Sterling snapped, his voice rising. He turned to Luke. "Is this volcano-free beef or what?" Luke, the French waiter, looked completely lost. "Monsieur, it is A5 Wagyu, the highest grade. That is all the information I have." Robert Mayfield, the manager, swooped in. His smile stretched painfully thin. "Gentlemen, I can assure you our purveyor sources only the absolute finest cuts. Let me go and check the certification for you immediately." As Robert scurried away, Sterling's frustration finally boiled over. He gestured angrily at his own translator. "This is your fault. I'm paying you a fortune to make this smooth. Why can't you handle a simple question?" "Sir, it's not a simple question," the translator stammered. "It's a matter of extreme cultural nuance. The way he asked. It's a test. A test. I'm Henry Sterling. I don't get tested by my dinner guests." He hissed, his voice low, but vibrating with rage. Across the table, Mr. Tanaka and his two colleagues had placed their chopsticks down. They weren't speaking. They were simply watching, observing the meltdown. Their faces were blank, but their judgment was clear. The deal wasn't just stalling. It was actively dying right there on the pristine white tablecloth. From her station, Khloe felt a cold dread creep up her spine. She knew exactly what was happening. This wasn't about the beef. It was about Omotenashi, the Japanese concept of wholehearted, anticipatory hospitality. It was about showing that you had considered every possible need of your guest before they even realized it themselves. Sterling hadn't just failed to anticipate their needs. He was openly mocking them as unreasonable. In the silent, brutal calculus of Japanese business etiquette, he had just committed an unforgivable sin. He had caused his guests to lose face by making their concerns seem trivial. Robert returned, his face ashen. "Mr. Sterling, I have the paperwork. The farm is indeed 70 kilometers from Sakurajima. However, the certificate is in Japanese." It was the final straw. Sterling slammed his fist on the table, not hard enough to knock anything over, but with enough force to make every head in the hushed restaurant turn. The sound was like a gunshot in a library. "Useless!" He snarled, his furious gaze sweeping past Robert, past Luke, past his own terrified team. "I'm surrounded by useless people. This is the best restaurant in New York City. And nobody here has the basic competence to handle one simple thing. Is there anyone in this entire $1-million establishment who speaks Japanese?" The question hung in the air, a raw, desperate challenge. The silence that followed was absolute and damning. Luke looked at the floor. Robert's mouth opened and closed with no sound. The translator seemed to shrink in his chair. And from the shadows, Khloe Reed took one involuntary step forward. Henry Sterling's outburst had shattered the carefully constructed illusion of the gilded compass. The low hum of conversation at other tables died away, replaced by a tense, voyeuristic silence. Diners peeked over their wine glasses, their expressions a mixture of shock and morbid curiosity. The air itself seemed to hold its breath. Sterling's face was a mask of thunderous rage, his complexion ruddy. He felt control, the one thing he valued above all else, slipping through his fingers. The $10 billion deal was evaporating before his eyes, not because of market fluctuations or a competitor's savvy move, but because of a piece of meat and a volcano. The sheer absurdity of it fueled his fury. "Well," he demanded, his voice dropping to a dangerous, serrated whisper as he glared at Robert Mayfield. "I'm waiting for an answer, Robert. Or is your job title Manager of Incompetence?" Robert, a man who had placated Arab princes and soothed the egos of Hollywood legends, was visibly trembling. "Mr. Sterling, I deeply apologize. It is a failing on our part. We do not have a Japanese-speaking staff member on duty tonight. It was an oversight." "An oversight?" Sterling's laugh was a dry, ugly sound. "An oversight is forgetting to put a lemon twist in a martini. This is a multi-billion-dollar catastrophe. You're fired, Robert. Pack your things. I'll buy this restaurant tomorrow morning just to have the pleasure of firing you again." The threat was real. Everyone knew Sterling had the money and the spite to do it. Robert's face went white. He had a mortgage, 2 kids in college. His entire life was built on his reputation, and Henry Sterling was about to incinerate it in a fit of pique. Across the table, Mr. Tanaka finally moved. He picked up his napkin, folded it precisely, and placed it on the table. It was a clear, unambiguous signal. The dinner was over. His 2 colleagues followed his lead in perfect synchrony. The deal was dead. "Wait!" Sterling barked, a note of pure panic now cutting through his anger. He turned to his own team. "Do something, fix this." His VPs looked at each other in helpless terror. What could they do? The cultural damage was done. The offense was absolute. The corporate translator, seeing the end of his own career, simply stared at his plate defeated. It was in this moment of complete and utter breakdown that Khloe moved. It wasn't a conscious decision. It was an instinct, a reflex honed by years of living in a world where harmony was paramount, and public displays of discord were the ultimate shame. She saw Robert's career about to be destroyed over an honest mistake. She saw a lifetime of work on both sides of the table about to be undone by ego and ignorance. And she saw 3 visitors in a foreign country being subjected to a deeply uncomfortable, humiliating experience. She took another step, then another, emerging from the relative obscurity of the service station into the harsh spotlight of table 12. Her heart was a frantic drum against her ribs. Every instinct screamed at her to stay invisible to protect the fragile anonymity she had so carefully constructed. The name Khloe Reed was a fiction, a flimsy shield. Revealing her fluency in Japanese, especially the rare formal dialect she commanded, was like lighting a flare in the dead of night. It would attract attention. It could lead him to her. But the sight of Robert Mayfield's ashen, terrified face tipped the scales. He had been kind to her, giving her a job when she'd shown up with no references and a haunted look in her eyes. He'd never pried, never asked questions. He had given her a sanctuary, and Sterling was about to burn it to the ground. Her soft-soled shoes made no sound on the plush carpet. She stopped just behind and to the side of Robert, a respectful distance from the table. She bowed. Not a shallow Western-style nod of the head, but a deep, formal bow from the waist, her back straight, her hands clasped in front of her. A bow of profound apology and respect. The entire table, including Sterling, stared at her. Who was this waitress? What was she doing? For a few seconds she said nothing, holding the bow. It was a gesture of deference, a silent request for permission to speak, a way of resetting the disastrous emotional tone of the room. When she finally straightened, her eyes were not on the fuming billionaire, but on Mr. Tanaka. And then she spoke. Her voice, when it came, was quiet but clear, cutting through the thick, tense atmosphere like a silver bell. The words that came out of her mouth were not the hesitant textbook phrases of a student. They were fluid, elegant, and pitched in the impossibly polite and formal register of Keigo, the honorific speech used for addressing those of the highest status. It was a level of Japanese that few non-native speakers ever mastered, redolent of old-world Kyoto, of diplomacy, of deep ingrained respect. She was apologizing. Not just for the confusion about the meal, but for the entire atmosphere, for the breach of harmony, for the discomfort of the guests, for the loud voice and aggressive posture of their host. She was taking the blame as a representative of the establishment onto herself. The effect was instantaneous and profound. The moment Khloe began to speak, the universe of the gilded compass tilted on its axis. Henry Sterling's jaw, which had been set in a hard line of fury, went slack with utter shock. His VPs and translator stared as if she had just sprouted wings. Robert Mayfield looked like he was witnessing a miracle, but Khloe's attention was fixed entirely on the three Japanese men. She addressed only Mr. Tanaka, but her words and her posture encompassed his companions, acknowledging their presence and their shared experience. In English, what she said was an apology, but in Japanese it was a work of art. She didn't say, "I'm sorry for the confusion." She said, speaking in the flawless, intricate cadence of formal Japanese, "Tanaka-sama, on behalf of our entire unworthy establishment, I must beg your forgiveness for the unforgivable lapse in our hospitality. That we have caused a guest of your esteemed stature even a moment's discomfort has brought a shadow of deep shame upon this house. My master's ignorance is a reflection of my own poor training, for which I humbly apologize." The words were a masterclass in cultural deflection and honor. She called Mr. Tanaka by the highest honorific "sama." She referred to the restaurant as unworthy. She subtly reframed Sterling's volcanic rage, not as malice, but as the ignorance of a master, and then incredibly took the blame for his ignorance upon herself as a humble servant. In one short, breathtakingly elegant statement, she had absorbed the entirety of Sterling's offense, reframed it as a failing of the restaurant's service, and offered a path for Mr. Tanaka to accept the apology without further embarrassing his host. She had given everyone in the room an escape route. Mr. Tanaka's eyebrows, which had been knitted in a mask of stern disapproval, rose a fraction of an inch. It was the first genuine, unscripted expression he had shown all evening. He looked at this young waitress, truly looked at her for the first time. He saw not a servant, but a person of unexpected depth. He responded his own Japanese formal, but now tinged with curiosity. "You speak the language of my home with surprising grace," he said. "It is a rare skill to find in this country." Khloe bowed her head slightly. "You are too kind, Tanaka-sama. I was fortunate to have spent some years in your beautiful country. It is a land that values subtlety, a lesson my employer has yet to master, for which again I ask for your gracious understanding." Again, the brilliant subtlety. She complimented his country while simultaneously, and with the utmost politeness, pointing out the core of the problem, Sterling's lack of subtlety, while framing it as a forgivable, almost charming American flaw. Sterling, who understood none of the words, but could read the dramatic shift in the room's atmosphere, was mesmerized. The rage had drained from his face, replaced by a stunned, disbelieving awe. He watched this waitress, an employee he wouldn't have recognized 2 minutes earlier, single-handedly diffuse a situation that his entire high-paid team had made infinitely worse. "Mr. Wall." Tanaka then gestured towards the certificate of origin for the beef that Robert was still clutching like a holy relic. "The matter of the steak," he said in Japanese. "It was perhaps a foolish question." "Not at all, Tanaka-sama," Khloe replied instantly, switching to a tone of profound earnestness. "A discerning palate that can distinguish the influence of a mountain soil on the flavor of beef is a sign of a true epicure. It speaks of a deep connection to the land and its gifts. We were unprepared for such expertise, and that is our failure. Allow me." She took the certificate from Robert's nerveless fingers. Her eyes scanned the complex Japanese characters of the document. After a moment, she looked up. "The document confirms that the ranch is in the Kirishima range, well outside the primary ashfall zone of Sakurajima. The cattle's diet is supplemented with a special blend of rice straw and barley, ensuring a clean, pure flavor. The rancher's name is Ito, a family that has raised this specific bloodline of cattle for 3 generations. They are known for their humane practices and the sweetness of the beef's fat." She relayed this information, not as a dry list of facts, but as if she were telling a story, imbuing the details with a sense of reverence. She hadn't just translated the document. She had conveyed its soul. One of Mr. Tanaka's younger colleagues let out a small, involuntary gasp of admiration. Mr. Tanaka himself allowed a small, genuine smile to grace his lips. This was more than he had asked for. This was Omotenashi. He picked up his chopsticks. "In that case," he said, his voice now warm, "it would be a shame to let such a fine meal grow cold." His colleagues immediately followed suit. The crisis was over. The silent, tense standoff had been broken. The dinner and the $10 billion deal that depended on it was back on. Henry Sterling stared at Khloe, his mind reeling. He had built an empire on identifying and acquiring assets of immense value. And he had the sudden, dizzying realization that the most valuable asset in this entire 70-story building was not the real estate, not the art on the walls, and certainly not himself. It was the quiet, unassuming waitress who was now discreetly motioning for Luke to serve the main course as if she hadn't just performed corporate open-heart surgery. What followed was one of the most surreal hours of Henry Sterling's life. Khloe did not simply retreat back to her station. With a nod from a shell-shocked Robert, she assumed a new unspoken role at the table. She became the bridge. She stood a few paces back, a phantom presence stepping forward only when needed. She didn't replace Sterling's corporate translator. That would have been a grave insult to the young man, however out of his depth he was. Instead, she supplemented him. When a complex cultural idea was presented, and the translator would provide a literal word-for-word interpretation, Khloe would wait a beat, and then, if necessary, offer a quiet clarification to Sterling's VPs. What Mr. Tanaka is referring to as the sound of the cicada, she explained in a near whisper after one particularly poetic exchange, is a metaphor for appreciating transient beauty. He's not talking about insects. He's comparing the short-term profit model of many Western companies with the Japanese philosophy of building a business that can endure for 100 years. Suddenly, a conversation that had seemed like opaque, mystical nonsense became a sharp business insight. Sterling's team began to understand. They stopped trying to impress and started to listen. Khloe's true genius, however, was in how she translated Sterling to the Japanese. She became his cultural filter. When Sterling, in his typical blunt fashion, said, "Our Q4 projections are aggressive and will crush the competition," Khloe would perform a subtle act of linguistic alchemy. She would turn to Mr. Tanaka and say in her serene, formal Japanese, "Sterling-sama has immense confidence in the market's positive reception of our shared venture. He envisions a future where our combined strength creates a new standard of excellence, encouraging our competitors to improve their own offerings for the benefit of all." She transformed his combative zero-sum declarations into visions of shared prosperity and mutual respect. She wasn't lying. She was translating his intent, not his words. She was building a bridge between a mindset focused on victory and one focused on harmony. Mr. Tanaka was captivated. He began directing more of his conversation towards Khloe, engaging her in discussions about Japanese art, about the seasonal changes in Central Park, about the philosophy of ceramics. He was no longer just assessing a business partner. He was exploring the character of his host's establishment, and by extension, his host. Through Khloe Sterling, a man who had been a boorish caricature just an hour before, was being repainted as a powerful but unpolished leader who had the wisdom to surround himself with people of grace and intelligence. Khloe handled it all with an effortless poise that was both astonishing and, for her, terrifying. With every perfectly chosen phrase, every correctly interpreted nuance, she felt the walls of her anonymity crumbling. This was the world she had run from. This was the language of her gilded childhood in the Tokyo diplomatic quarter, a world of high-stakes conversations where a misplaced word could cause an international incident. She had been trained in this art by tutors by her mother, by the very air she breathed for 18 years. She was good at it because it was a part of who she was, a part she had tried to amputate. The dessert course arrived, and the atmosphere was now not just cordial, but genuinely warm. Mr. Tanaka was smiling, telling a story about his grandson. Sterling, humbled into a rare state of listening, was actually laughing along his VPs, looking on in relieved disbelief. As the meal concluded, Mr. Tanaka stood. He bowed first to Sterling, a standard polite bow. Then he turned to Khloe. He gave her a bow of identical depth and sincerity. "The meal was excellent," he said, allowing Khloe to translate. "But the hospitality was transcendent. It is a rare thing to find a soul that understands the heart of a culture, not just its language. You have done your house a great honor tonight." He then turned back to Sterling. "We will sign the preliminary agreement tomorrow at 9 a.m. in your office. My team and I are very much looking forward to a long and prosperous partnership with Tech." The words hung in the air, golden and perfect. The deal was done. $10 billion, sealed not by lawyers and spreadsheets, but by the quiet grace of a waitress. As the Japanese delegation was escorted to their cars by the ecstatic VPs, Henry Sterling remained at the table. The restaurant was emptying out the staff, beginning their quiet end-of-night routines. Sterling didn't move. He just watched Khloe, who had silently retreated and was now clearing glasses from an adjacent table. Her movements as precise and unassuming as they had been at the start of the night. It was as if the past hour had been a dream. But Sterling knew it wasn't. He waited until she was alone in the section. Then he rose from his chair and walked towards her. His expression was no longer angry or awed or even relieved. It was the look he got when he had identified a target for acquisition. "Khloe Reed," he said, his voice low and serious. "You and I need to have a conversation." The chaotic energy of the dinner service had bled away, leaving behind the tired, methodical calm of closing time. The gilded compass was exhaling. The low murmur of the last remaining patrons was a ghost of the earlier buzz, and the clinking of cutlery being sorted in the distant kitchen was a gentle rhythmic punctuation to the quiet. Khloe moved through this landscape of pristine debris, her body on autopilot. She collected salt and pepper shakers, wiped down the dark wood of empty tables, and stacked bread plates onto her tray. Each mundane task was a small anchor, keeping her tethered to the simple reality of Khloe Reed the waitress, while her mind reeled in the turbulent aftermath of what she had done. She could feel Henry Sterling's eyes on her. It was a palpable sensation, like the heat of a spotlight. He hadn't left with his jubilant team. He remained at the now cleared table 12, a solitary, powerful figure silhouetted against the glittering tapestry of the city. He wasn't looking at the view. He was watching her. She knew the confrontation was inevitable, and with every passing second, the dread coiled tighter in her stomach. The adrenaline that had sharpened her wits and loosened her tongue had long since dissipated, leaving behind the cold, familiar residue of fear. She had spent 3 years building a fortress of anonymity, brick by boring brick. A quiet life, a forgettable job, a name that wasn't her own. Tonight, to save a kind man's job and prevent a spectacular cultural implosion, she had stepped out from behind the battlements and launched a flare high into the night sky. And now, the most powerful man she had ever encountered was walking deliberately toward that light, his footsteps unnervingly silent on the thick carpet. Khloe finished arranging the plates on her tray, the weight of the porcelain a flimsy shield. She forced herself to breathe, to keep her hands from trembling. "You are Khloe Reed," she told herself, a desperate mantra. "You are no one. He can't see what isn't there." "Leave that," he said. His voice was not loud, but it possessed a resonant authority that cut through the room's ambient noise. It was a voice accustomed to absolute, unquestioning obedience. Khloe froze her back still to him. She closed her eyes for a fraction of a second, then turned, schooling her features into a mask of polite, professional deference. "Sir." Sterling stopped a few feet away, his intense blue eyes scanning her as if she were a complex schematic he was trying to decipher. The raw fury from earlier was gone, replaced by a charged, analytical curiosity that she found far more unnerving. "I've seen a lot of things in my 52 years. He began, his voice a low, intense hum. "I've seen code writers who can think in 5 languages. I've seen physicists who can sketch out the universe on a napkin. But I have never in my entire life seen anything like what you did back there." He gestured vaguely toward the table. "You didn't just translate words. You conducted a symphony of etiquette. You took a train wreck and transformed it into a diplomatic triumph. My board of directors pays a crisis management firm $3 million a year, and their best advice would have been to run. You, on the other hand, you fixed it. He took a step closer. So I'm going to ask you again, and this time I want a real answer. Who are you? The question hung in the air between them. Khloe's heart hammered against her ribs. The truth was a loaded weapon, and she would not hand it to him. My name is Khloe Reed, Mr. Sterling. I'm a waitress. A flicker of impatience crossed his face. Stop it. Don't insult my intelligence, and more importantly, don't insult your own. Your Japanese was more than fluent. It was aristocratic. Your understanding of their culture was academic. A person doesn't acquire that level of skill waiting tables. So what is it? Ex-diplomat's kid. A runaway academic. Corporate espionage. He had a ghost of a smile on his lips at the last one, but his eyes were deadly serious. I was fortunate to have a good education and lived abroad when I was younger. Khloe said, the carefully constructed half-truth feeling flimsy and transparent under his dissecting gaze. That's all. He stared at her for a long moment, the silence stretching. He knew she was lying, and she knew that he knew. It was a silent, mutual acknowledgement that brought a new level of tension to the exchange. He sighed a gust of frustrated air and abruptly changed his approach. Fine, he said, waving a hand as if to dismiss her entire defense. Don't tell me. I don't care about your past. Your future is what interests me. He reached into the inner pocket of his tailored jacket, producing a slim platinum fountain pen and a checkbook bound in dark leather. The quiet snick of the pen cap coming off was louder than a gunshot in the hushed room. Whatever you're doing here, it's over, he stated, not as an offer, but as a declaration of fact. This is not your life anymore. He began to write his movements sharp and decisive. I'm writing you a check for $100,000. Think of it as an inconvenience fee for having to find a new apartment and quit your job. It's a signing bonus. He tore the check from the book with a precise tearing sound and held it out. Khloe stared at the slip of paper. The amount was dizzying. It represented a safety she couldn't even fathom, the ability to disappear again, to go anywhere, to build a better, stronger fortress. But she knew with absolute certainty that it was not a key to freedom. It was the first link in a very beautiful, very expensive chain. She made no move to take it. Sterling's eyes narrowed slightly at her stillness. That's your appetizer, he continued undeterred. The main course is your role. You'll be my senior advisor for global strategy. It's a new position I just created. You'll answer directly to me. Your base salary will be $750,000. Corporate apartment in the Aura-Tech Tower, the one with the view that makes this place look like a basement. A car and driver. Unlimited expense account. Your job will be to be the voice in my ear, the brain in my head, for every dealing we have in Asia, starting with the Yamato merger. You will ensure I never make a fool of myself like that again. You will make us unstoppable. He was painting a picture of a life she had once known, a life of immense privilege, power, and visibility. A life that had nearly destroyed her. The thought of stepping back into that world, even a different version of it, sent a wave of panic through her so potent it was almost nauseating. She could almost feel the cold, possessive hand of her stepfather on her shoulder. She finally met his gaze, her own grey eyes clear and unwavering. Mr. Sterling, that is the most generous offer I could ever imagine. I am truly grateful. Her voice was soft, but the core of it was steel. But I have to decline. If she had slapped him, the effect would have been less dramatic. Henry Sterling was a man who moved markets, toppled competitors, and bent reality to his will. The word no was not a part of his operational vocabulary, especially not from someone he considered himself to be rescuing from obscurity. For a moment, he was utterly silent, his mind rebooting to process the alien concept. Decline. He finally repeated the word, tasting strange in his mouth. What do you mean you decline? Is this a negotiation? You want $1 million? Done. $1,000,005. Name the number. I will not be outbid for talent like yours. It's not about the money, sir. She said the words, feeling achingly inadequate to explain the chasm between his offer and her reality. Then what in God's name is it about? He demanded, his voice rising with incredulous frustration. I am offering you the world on a silver platter, a chance to use a gift that 1 in 100 million people possesses. You want to stay here, spilling wine on tourists and clearing away half-eaten food for the rest of your life. That's your grand ambition. Every word was a jab designed to make her feel small, to make her choice seem insane. And a part of her, the logical part, screamed that he was right. But the deeper part, the part that remembered suffocating fear and the desperate flight in the middle of the night, knew he was fatally wrong. I have my reasons, she said, her voice quiet but firm. I prefer a simple life. The world you're describing, the pressure, the constant visibility, it's not for me. I am happy here. The lie was blatant, but she delivered it with such finality that Sterling, for the first time, paused his assault. He looked at her, truly looked past the uniform and the polite refusal. He saw the tension in her jaw, the rigid control in her posture, the subtle way she angled herself toward the exit. And finally, he saw the deep, undeniable flicker of fear in her eyes. This wasn't a negotiation. This was a flight response. His expression shifted from frustration to a profound, calculating intrigue. The puzzle of Khloe Reed had just become infinitely more complex, and therefore infinitely more He lowered the check. I don't believe you, he said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Not for a second. You're not happy here. You're hiding. But I won't press you on it. For now. With a decisive click, he retracted the nib of his fountain pen. He turned the check over, and on the blank back he wrote his personal cell phone number. This is my private line. Not my assistant's, not my office's. Mine. He didn't offer the check to her this time. Instead, he stepped forward and carefully slid it onto her tray, placing it directly beside a half-empty water glass. The offer stands, every part of it. When you realize that a simple life is no life at all for someone like you call that number, day or night. He looked at her one last time, a long, searching gaze that felt like it was mapping her very soul. Don't be a fool, Khloe Reed. A person only gets one chance to change their entire destiny. This is yours. Without another word, he turned and strode out of the silent dining room, a king leaving a court that no longer made sense to him. Khloe stood motionless, the immense empty space seeming to press in on her. Her gaze fell to the tray. There it was. A slip of paper bearing a 7-figure salary offer, a $100,000 bonus, and a 10-digit phone number. It was a lifeline. It was a time bomb. And it had her fake name written right on it. The name Henry Sterling would now use to start digging. The flare she had launched was no longer just a light. It was now a beacon, and she knew with a chilling certainty that he would follow it all the way down into the darkness of her past. Henry Sterling did not become a billionaire by accepting things he didn't understand. Khloe Reed's refusal was a puzzle, and Sterling's mind was engineered to solve puzzles, whether they were in lines of code or in the perplexing motivations of human beings. For 2 days he left the check and the offer hanging in the air, expecting a call. None came. On the 3rd day, his patience, a notoriously finite resource, ran out. He didn't delegate the task. This was personal. He sat in his minimalist penthouse office, the city lights spread beneath him like a carpet of scattered diamonds, and he initiated a search for Khloe Reed. He engaged the best corporate security and private investigation firm money could buy, a discreet outfit on Park Avenue, run by a former MI6 officer. The initial results were frustratingly thin. Khloe Reed, aged 24, had a social security number issued just 3 years ago. Her employment history began and ended with the Gilded Compass. She had a small, bare-bones apartment in Queens. No credit history beyond a single, low-limit credit card paid on time. No social media presence. No family listed. No past. She was, for all intents and purposes, a ghost who had materialized in New York City 36 months ago. This is a clean identity. The investigator, a crisp Englishman named David Chenoweth, reported over a secure line. Professionally done, but not government level. It's meant to withstand a cursory background check, not a deep dive by someone like you, Mr. Sterling. So dive deeper, Sterling commanded. Fingerprints from her employment application. Facial recognition against every database you can access. I want to know who she was before she became a waitress.
That is 7 centimeters.
The resources of a multi-billionaire are vast. They bypassed legal channels using back doors into international databases. For a week, they found nothing. It was as if she had been born on the day she applied for her Social Security card. Then they got a hit. A partial facial recognition match flagged from a guest list database at a diplomatic function in Tokyo 5 years prior. The photo was of a younger woman, her hair styled differently, wearing a formal silk gown. The name on the list was not Khloe Reed. It was Catherine Ashford. With a name, the floodgates opened. Catherine Ashford was the stepdaughter of U.S. Senator Robert Davenport, a powerful, charismatic politician with a frighteningly clean public image and rumored ties to ruthless corporate lobbyists. Davenport had served as a trade liaison in Japan for several years. His wife, Catherine's mother, had passed away when Catherine was a teenager. Catherine, a brilliant student of language and culture, had essentially become her stepfather's hostess and unofficial translator at countless functions. Then 3 years ago, she had vanished. The official story fed to the society pages was that she had chosen to pursue her art studies at a private secluded institution in Europe to grieve her mother's passing away from the public eye. But Chenoweth's team found something else. They found a pattern of control. They found sealed university records, a restraining order filed by Catherine against a family associate that was mysteriously withdrawn a week later. They found whispers from former household staff about Senator Davenport's possessive, almost obsessive behavior towards his stepdaughter after his wife's death, his insistence on controlling every aspect of her life. Sterling sat at his desk, reading the encrypted report, and for the first time he understood. Khloe. Catherine wasn't just hiding. She was running. Her refusal of his offer wasn't an act of pride. It was an act of self-preservation. A high-profile job as his personal liaison would have put her directly in the spotlight, a spotlight her powerful and controlling stepfather would undoubtedly see. He felt a cold knot of something unfamiliar in his gut. It was a mix of anger at the senator and a grudging respect for the woman who had traded a life of privilege for anonymous freedom. He had seen her as an asset to be acquired. Now he saw her as a person in a cage. That evening he didn't call. He went to her apartment building in Queens. He didn't take his security detail. He waited across the street in an unremarkable town car as she got off the subway looking small and tired in a simple coat a world away from the commanding presence she'd had in the restaurant. He watched her check over her shoulder before entering her building, a habitual gesture of someone who never feels truly safe. He gave her 10 minutes, then he went to her door and knocked. She opened it on a chain, her eyes wide with alarm when she saw him. "Mr. Sterling, how did you find me?" "I'm a man who solves puzzles," he said quietly, his tone devoid of its usual arrogance. "May I come in?" "Catherine?" The use of her real name made her flinch as if he'd struck her. She stared at him, her mind racing a cornered animal, deciding whether to fight or flee. She saw something new in his eyes, not acquisitiveness, but a kind of grim understanding. Slowly she closed the door and slid the chain off. Her apartment was tiny, neat, and impersonal. There were no photographs, no mementos. It was the home of someone who didn't plan to stay. "My stepfather," she began, her voice trembling. "Is a problem," Sterling finished for her. "I know. I'm not here to expose you. I'm here to change the deal." He remained standing, giving her space. "The offer of $750,000 a year, the apartment, the car, it's all off the table. It was the wrong offer. It was loud. It was public. It was everything you don't want." He paused, letting the words sink in. "Here is the new deal. I am creating a new unlisted subsidiary of Aura Tech, a cultural consultancy division with a staff of 1. You. You will work from anywhere you choose. Your name will not be on any masthead. You will not attend public meetings. Your official title will be Research Analyst for a non-existent department." He looked her straight in the eye. "Your job will be to be my eyes and ears on all matters of international protocol, starting with Japan. You will prep my team. You will review my correspondence. You will be my secret weapon, the ghost in my machine. Your salary will be $1 million a year, paid through a discreet trust that will be impossible to trace back to me or to you. And my security firm, the one that found you, will now be dedicated to making sure no one else ever does. They will create a digital fortress around your new identity, and they will keep a very close, very quiet watch on Senator Davenport." Catherine stared at him, speechless. He wasn't offering her a job. He was offering her a shield. He was offering her protection, anonymity, and the resources to stay free, all while using the skills she had tried to bury. He had seen her cage, and instead of trying to buy her, he was offering her a way to reinforce it against the outside world, while giving her the freedom to move within it. "Why?" she finally whispered. "Why would you do all this?" Henry Sterling, the ruthless titan of tech, looked around the small, bare apartment and gave an answer of startling honesty. "Because for the first time in 20 years, I was reminded that the most valuable things in this world, talent, integrity, courage, are not things that can be bought. They have to be earned. And because my $10 billion deal is on the line, and I'll be damned if I'm going to let it get screwed up by my own arrogance again. I need you. But I'm offering you a partnership, not a leash." For the first time in 3 years, Catherine Ashford felt a flicker of something she thought she had lost forever hope. She saw a path forward that wasn't about hiding, but about building. She looked at the man before her, a flawed, arrogant, impatient billionaire who had against all odds shown a capacity for understanding and respect. "My friend's here," she said, her voice gaining strength. "They call me Khloe." Sterling allowed a small, rare smile. "All right, Khloe. Do we have a deal?" She took a deep breath, and for the first time, it didn't feel like she was just surviving. It felt like she was beginning. "Yes, Mr. Sterling," she said. "We have a deal." And so the waitress, who spoke perfect Japanese, didn't just get a job. She reclaimed her life. Her story isn't just about a lucky break. It's a powerful reminder that our greatest strengths are often forged in the very pasts we try to escape. It proves that true value isn't always loud and on display. Sometimes it's the quiet voice in the room that speaks with the most authority. Henry Sterling learned that respect is a greater currency than money, and Khloe learned that you can't hide from your talents forever. Sometimes the only way to be truly safe is to embrace the full force of who you are. What do you think? Was Sterling's transformation believable? What would you have done in Khloe's position? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If this story of hidden strength and unexpected alliances resonated with you, please hit that like button, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and be sure to subscribe for more real-life stories that will make you think.